Everyone I know has a Kenji López-Alt story, whether it's one of his recipes or cookbooks that changed their connection to cooking, or a recommendation of his that led them to their new favorite spot. Joining us on the pod today is James Beard award-winning chef, food scientist, and best-selling author of The Food Lab, The Walk, and Every Night is Pizza Night. Welcome to the podcast, Kenji López-Alt.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, Kenji, I distinctly remember the buzz when you moved to town. Like, friends of mine who don't even live in Seattle were like, did you know Kenji lives in Seattle now? And I was like, oh, dang, okay, I got to check out what he's checking out. I just wanted to ask, like, what brought you to Seattle?
I love Seattle. My ex-wife and I were having another child, and we're looking for, like, a bigger place. We were living in the Bay Area at the time, and we were like, you know, we come to Seattle so frequently, and it's like, I love it every time, so, like, why don't we look up there? And it was, you know, it was during the pandemic, and so both of us were, you know, not going into jobs, so it seemed like the right time to do it, and so we did. We moved, November of 2020.
Oof, it was a weird time then. But
yeah,
good time to pick up and move and check out a new place. So I actually also moved from the Bay Area up to Seattle, but years before you. What did you find was, I guess, different about Seattle compared to the Bay, especially in terms of the food scene?
Well, I mean, Seattle, I think it's much greener than the Bay Area. It's a much more lush place. And so, I mean, you get different sets of ingredients up here just because of that. And I think the seasons here are also more distinct, you know, and I grew up in the Northeast where there's really distinct seasons. And so that, you know, the cooking to match the weather is like something that I was used to growing up, and then living in the Bay Area, where it was just like, you know, mild all year round. I sort of missed that element of it.
Yeah.
You know, I think Seattle, I lived in Boston for a long time also, for like 10 years. And I think Seattle and Boston have a sort of similar thing where there's a lot of casual seafood, which doesn't, you know, like in cities like New York and San Francisco, where I've also lived, it feels like if you're going to get seafood, it's going to be more expensive, you know, whereas like, you know, Seattle, there's abundant, inexpensive seafood. Well, inexpensive as far as Seattle goes.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, God, what I miss most about the Bay, though, is the abundance of strawberries and just how cheap and like how frequently they were in season. Like I feel like April to like November, but
we have more berries in Seattle, you know, in the Pacific Northwest than anywhere else in the world.
So true. And they're free. I remember that being one of the first things I did was like, it was a Discovery Park and was like, look at all these free blackberries. And it turns out
they're invasive blackberries.
Exactly. You're like, I'm getting free berries and I'm helping eradicate this invasive species a little bit. Not that it is ever going away. Well, okay, Kenji, so since you've arrived in Seattle, I feel like you've been kind of a tastemaker. Like you have gone out so many different places, and I've definitely heard about, you know, people being like, oh, I heard about this from Kenji and it's blown up for a few weeks after your recommendation. How do you find new spots, and what goes into your decision to feature them?
I mean, you know, I didn't set out to be a tastemaker. My goal, you know, when I moved to Seattle, having been a restaurant owner during the pandemic, like, you know, I knew how difficult it was. And I also find that you really get to know a place by going out and eating and seeing, you know, like what cultures have influenced the food scene here, because it gives you an eye into the history of immigration and cultures mixing in the city. But you know, so my goal was just go find good places, try and go to different neighborhoods. That way I can sort of get to know my city, my new city. And, you know, and I find that I find places generally just by people recommending them to me. So, and I find that the more freely I share my recommendations, like people are always willing to like jump in the comments and say, oh, if you like this, go try this place or go try that place. And so that's generally how I do it. And the why I do it is because I enjoy it.
Yeah. No, I mean,
I like going
getting out and
people.
trying new places. It's always just kind of a joy to see there's always something new opening in Seattle. I feel like also.
Well, Seattle, it feels like it's manageable. You know, like I lived in New York for a long time, and I was also doing like restaurant coverage then, and that was just like overwhelming all the time. Like there's just so much going on all the time.
Yeah,
whereas,
too much
whereas
to
Seattle
cover.
feels like, you know, very manageable in that regard.
Yeah.
Like there's really great food and there's always something exciting going on, but there's like not so much that you just feel like dizzy.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, I guess speaking of restaurant coverage, I feel like traditionally restaurant coverage has meant critic in a lot of cases. We talked with, I believe, a friend of yours, also Zoe Khan, a few months ago about her role. You know, she goes out and tries sandwiches. I know you all have been out together too.
Yeah.
And she described herself as more of a celebrator rather than a critic. And I'm curious what you see your role as.
You know, in a city like New York, where, you know, there's like, it feels like every restaurant opening is like a little soap opera, you know? And sometimes, you know, so it feels like the role of a critic, I think, is to really do reporting on a restaurant that is of interest, you know? And that could include saying bad things, saying good things. Yeah, just generally criticizing. You know, I used to do things like that. What I find now, though, is like, you know, my goal is to lead people to good food. It's not necessarily to, you know, if I feel like writing a cultural piece about the restaurant industry, I can do that. But my goal, like on my social media, is really just to like lead people to good food. And so, you know, I try to go to places a few times, especially if I have a bad experience somewhere, I'll try and go again. But generally, you know, I find if I were to share like a negative experience at a restaurant, it's not really that useful, because like most people who are going to see that post probably weren't planning on going to that restaurant in the first place, you know, so it might deter a few people who are thinking of going there from going. And you know, those people might have had a good experience there. So I find generally like expending energy on doing something negative, especially like in an industry that is so difficult in the first place, like is just not what I'm about, you know? And so I'd much rather just save my energy for finding places that I really like and sharing that.
Yeah, just not how you want to spend your time.
Yeah. And I don't think it's helpful to anybody other than, you know, like the feeding this desire for like, you know, like watching accidents, you know, and people like reading gossip and horror stories. But, you know, I feel like if it's just about like, you know, I didn't like the food or the waiter said this funny thing to me, you know, that to me, it's like, it's just not worth talking about. It just feeds negativity.
Yeah. Okay, so settle a long-standing debate among Seattleites.
Okay.
Is Seattle a real fine dining town? Do we have like a bona fide scene here?
It depends what you mean by fine dining. Certainly, like Seattle's a very casual town. So I don't think there's any place. I mean, I think Canlis at one point had a dress code, but they don't anymore. Although they did once make me wear a jacket when I came in straight from a fishing trip and I was like covered in fish guts. But, you know, so in that sense, like, you know, Seattle doesn't really have a fine dining scene as far as sort of like the whole like theater of fine dining goes. You know, Canlis would be the place you get closest to that, I think. But that doesn't mean that there isn't like an exciting food scene here. You know, there's still chefs who are doing really creative and interesting and, you know, difficult things. I think it's just all done in a more casual way.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of even places like Altura, which are, you know, they're doing really amazing dishes, artfully presented.
Yeah.
And I think I've shown up there in jeans.
They're still doing like tasting menu only, right?
Yeah, and they've got their little sister restaurant across the street, which is Corello, I believe, which is a little less expensive. But I've always been kind of surprised that there's no like super buttoned up fancy place with a dress code really besides Canlis.
I mean, I think they just wouldn't get busy. Like people would just refuse, you know?
No, absolutely. So speaking of people enjoying gossip and train wrecks, I do feel like lately in town, there has been no shortage of scandals in the restaurant industry. I mean, not just in Seattle, but honestly, just globally even. But
yeah, I mean, the whole Noma thing, you know, I think it triggered another round of stories.
So for people who
out.
don't know about Noma, can you say a bit about what happened there?
Yeah. Well, so Noma is a restaurant in where? Denmark? Is it Denmark?
Yes. I believe in Copenhagen.
Yeah, maybe. But
yeah, it's Copenhagen.
Okay. Noma's a restaurant in Copenhagen that, you know, by whatever arbitrary standards like these lists make up, has been voted like the best restaurant in the world multiple times on multiple lists. And the chef there, Rene Redzepi, has he was accused and by multiple people in a story in the New York Times of really violent and abusive behavior, which is, you know, not new in kitchens.
Unfortunately not.
Unfortunately not. But you know, he was a very high profile guy. It happened right as he was opening up this $1,500 a head pop up in LA, which I think is dumb for many reasons. And you know, and then I think part of the whole scandal was the way that he dealt with it, which is like sort of like incrementally apologizing more as more things came to light, then eventually claiming he was stepping down, but really, not actually stepping down. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, so Noma, I feel
around.
like was on the kind of international stage. Like I saw people all over the world talking about this, leaving comments on the initial posts from the chef. But I feel like here in town too, there have been allegations of abuse in the restaurant industry, or a lot of reports of wage theft or just outright lack of payment. I mean, you mentioned none of this is particularly new, but why are we hearing it? Is it just me that it feels like we're hearing more about it now? Like, is it that?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
No. I think restaurants, because of their structure, they're sort of they start to feel the squeeze of wealth disparity sooner than a lot of other businesses might, and generally the people that get squeezed are the wait staff and the cooks. The people who have not that much power. That said, I think what we often get wrong when talking about this is pitting employees against owners, or employees against chefs, which I think is a mistake, because it's definitely true, of course, that there are chefs out there who are bad actors or deadbeats or just can't get their shit in order. Of course that exists, and I support employees unionizing and fighting for their own rights. But I think the bigger issue is that on all levels, from leadership to employees, restaurants are getting squeezed, and food prices are not going down. And Seattle has this other sort of wrinkle with our tipping policy. How employees make a basic hourly wage here, at least minimum wage, and then they get tipped out on top of that. But some restaurants and some servers don't like the whole tipping system, and have moved towards like a mandatory gratuity. It gets complicated on many levels, because then like those restaurants will automatically add charges to your bill, which upsets customers. But the reason they do it is because if they included it in the price, then you wouldn't go there, and you would go to another
You'd be
place
mad about the
that's
price
hiding
then.
the number. Yeah, the reality is that like restaurants, have very slim margins, and you're like always one little exploding toilet away from not being able to pay your employees, and I think that happens. And while there are, of course, bad employers, I think it's wrong to frame the argument consistently as like workers versus owners, when really it's like everybody versus the insane wealth disparity and the insane cost of real estate and all those factors that are exacerbating these problems.
So what I'm hearing is this is a recession indicator.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. I mean, the tough thing here, I feel like I've seen a few cases in which, the workers sometimes are kind of calling out their employer, or, saying we're going on strike, or we are just closing the restaurant and not working because we're not getting paid. I mean, once those restaurants reopen, hopefully they do. In some cases, I've seen it happen. In some cases, it's, still a little up in the air.
Yeah.
What is the role of a consumer? Like, I'm always unsure whether I should go back to that place knowing that this has happened. I guess I'm always wondering, like, well, if I don't go there, they're definitely going to go under, because now they're not bringing in any money. But also, is there any way to ever know if changes have been made to make this a better workplace for people?
Yeah, I mean that's a difficult question. I mean, not even like if changes have been made, because there's probably restaurants you're going to right now that have bad work environments or bad pay structures, and you just don't know it because they haven't come out with that yet. I don't really have a good answer for that. I think it kind of depends like how deeply you want to, how much this matters to you, and how deeply you want to research a place before you go. I generally try and research a place before I go and see if there's any sort of this history and what has been done to address it. Oftentimes you'll find that like, with places like Noma, for example, that, supposedly changes have been made, and you can sort of maybe trust that those changes have been made, but there's never really any, from the perpetrators, you often find there's like, there's some apologies, or there's like, oh, I was a different person back then, I don't do that anymore. Or like, we have these systems in place to stop it, but it doesn't really change what happened in the past. And very often, like, you find that there's not a real sort of redemption there from past wrongs. So that, that's something I also try and look at, is to see, has this person actually changed? What have they done to make amends for their past behavior? All that stuff.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
it's not easy.
Yeah, I feel like there's no incentive necessarily for a restaurateur to be super transparent about that. In the same way that I feel like it can often be tough to figure out, you were just talking about tipping, where that tip goes, if there is a tip.
Yeah.
And
I ask.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, that seems so simple. Why haven't I thought about just asking? I don't know. For some reason, it feels like one of those forbidden things where, like, you're not supposed to ask about like how much people make or something. But
no,
you're right.
I mean, generally, if there's like like an automatic gratuity and then there's in line for additional tip, I'll ask like, where, like how much of this do you actually see?
Do you get?
Yeah, and then leave an additional tip to address that. Yeah. But
No,
generally, the general policy I've seen is that it's based on hours and it's split between the front and the back of the house. Although I think that percentage split can change around.
I know. I mean, we mentioned that Seattle has this minimum wage. I feel like we were a leader in that.
Yeah.
If it were up to you, are there other things you could put into place in the restaurant industry here that would make us a leader nationally?
In the restaurant industry, I mean, there's a lot of sort of pipe dream things that.
Yeah, go for it. We're talking pipe dreams.
Maternity leave and parental leave in general, paid vacation, mandatory time off, because like it's very easy to burn out in a restaurant. We already have, hour limits and mandatory breaks, but just, I mean, the benefit, all the benefits that you would potentially get with another job would.
Yeah, having real benefits is
fixed
total
schedules also, which is really tough in the restaurant industry because there's, constantly no shows, or there's changing it's a dynamic environment, and so like getting a fixed schedule can be difficult.
Absolutely. All right, I want to shift gears a little bit, and I want to get some recommendations from you about cooking and about food. So now that the weather is getting warm again, I'm finding that I'm way worse at finding time to cook. Like something about the winter allows me to like hunker down, like, like I'll sit in the kitchen for an afternoon and like make big batches of things. But now with the sun still being out after work, I want to just finish work, like go for a bike ride, and then suddenly it's 8 p.m. and I'm like eating some toast or like a couple of clementines for dinner. And I need your help. I need to know, what are your recommendations for when you are tired of cooking or it's late and you haven't made anything yet? Like, what is the Kenji version of a girl dinner?
I go out and get food.
That's fair. What if I'm trying to be responsible and on a budget?
I mean, I love making sandwich. Like I find like a good sandwich is always something I can pull together. I probably eat like more quesadillas than if I've forgotten to eat during the day. I'm like, oh shit, I need something like in 3 minutes. It's like a quesadilla always hits for me.
Yes.
Or like, I mean, right now it's like it's the summer, so I if we go to the farmer's market one weekend, I'll overbuy, and so like I'll be trying to figure out how to get rid of vegetables that week. So some simple vegetable preparation.
What are you getting from the farmer's market these days that you're into?
Right now, asparagus. I mean, it's
asparagus.
I
got a bunch in my fridge too.
Yeah. I got a couple pounds in my fridge.
Nice.
Which we will probably eat tonight.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what are your go-to asparagus recipes then?
If I'm gonna be indoors, I'll just broil it. Like peel the tougher parts of the stem and then just broil it, or like just briefly boil it in salted water and shock it, and then like make like a homemade herb mayo, something for dipping,
Ooh, that sounds good.
Or like a hollandaise. I also love grilled asparagus. If you have like a gas grill, that's really quick and easy, or pizza
That's
oven.
what we did the other night.
Yeah,
it's grilling
grilled asparagus
season.
with like lemon and some chopped anchovy and garlic.
Oh, chopped anchovy is definitely an improvement I'd not thought of. Okay.
Yeah, just like some lemon juice and chopped anchovy and like one garlic clove and olive oil, and just like mix it up and pour it over the asparagus. It's good.
So good. I'm so glad it's almost summer again. Okay. Our producer Liam also wants to know, he has 2 young kids.
Okay.
How do you get your kids to eat exciting foods that are not carbs and fruit?
Well, with my older my daughter Alicia, it's very easy because she just likes everything. And my 4-year old doesn't like everything. No, he's a very like, yeah, pasta, rice, eggs kind of kid. But
Sounds about right for 4. Yeah.
Yeah, there are some vegetables he likes, but I mean, we just have a basic like you got to try it rule, and that if you don't like something, like you should just remember that like you don't like it today, but you might like it next
It
time.
could change.
It could
It's
change.
true.
It could change. Yeah. And then don't punish kids for not liking something. Like like my mom used to force us to eat everything on the plate, even if we hated it. And I don't think that's a healthy way to do it.
Surefire way to turn kids off. I think that's why I don't like mushrooms very much. Like I'm just kind of in my 30s coming into trying them again. Like I basically am gentle parenting myself into liking mushrooms again.
Well, there's a lot of mushrooms in Seattle.
There are, and unfortunately I'm discovering that I only like the really expensive ones. So I'm trying to work my way to the cheaper ones.
If you're lucky, you can just go out into the parks and find them,
Yeah, I feel like mushroom foraging is so big here, and I don't trust myself at all to do any kind of identification and not just like kill myself, but
there's apps that'll give you like at least make you feel a little bit better about it.
Totally. I mean, yeah, have you gone out and foraged yourself?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Nice. Are there any like groups or areas that you recommend people look into?
I mean, oyster mushrooms are generally very easy to find, like in Interlochen Park. There's, any park that we have that has like fallen trees and pine, like oyster mushrooms will grow on the sides of them after it rains. And so those are usually pretty easy to find. I've found some porcini here and there, but those are usually just like kind of stumble across. And then, if you're willing to drive out a little bit more, you can find all kinds of stuff. Matsutake grow abundantly around here. Yeah, and morels, morels grow in like areas where there were previous forest fires, so if there's been like a burned out area on a mountainside, just go look there and you'll probably find morels.
It's a little silver lining of our fire season around here, I guess.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, more morels.
So I also just saw on Instagram that you are working with Andrew Rubenstein at Hey Bagel on something, and I would love to know more about it because I love Hey Bagel. So
no, I've known Andrew for a while now, and no, we just thought it'd be fun to work on a limited time thing at the restaurant or at the bagel shop together. So I think it's probably going to come out in the fall, but yeah, we've just kind of been experimenting with flavors and ingredients.
Yeah. What does that look like? Like I am totally not in the chef world, but like what does riffing with another chef look like?
Well, a lot of it is throwing ideas back and forth, and then and then I'll make a bunch of test batches and we'll try them out, and then we kind of refine from there. It's it's sort of like any recipe development. You come up with ideas, you test them, and then you come up with new ideas, and you just kind of iterate until you get something you like.
I mean, I guess
at least that's how I work.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask, like, how do you work? Like, I only really have experience trying to be creative as like a writer, and I know that as a writer, sometimes for months ideas are kind of elusive, and you're kind of you're like, I just got nothing. Like, I feel no creativity. I don't feel particularly inspired, and then sometimes you're like, I'm just on. But I'm curious how it works for you. Like, what is your process in developing a recipe?
Yeah, I mean, as a writer and a recipe writer, I get that in both departments. Like, I get months where I don't feel inspired to write anything, or I don't feel creative, and similarly with coming up with recipes. But I mean, first of all, I always find that if I go and eat more and like try other people's food more, or if I read other people's books or other people's writing more, like that always inspires in some way, whether it's like reminding you that, oh, this is a thing I enjoy doing, or, it's like you like something really interesting about like the structure of their writing, or the flavors they're using. I find that, creativity is really just like, connecting dots that once you connect them, it seems obvious, but like they hadn't been connected before, either in your brain or in like the best cases, like you make other people see something in a really interesting and new way, and that you can't really force those connections. Like they, like with writing or with recipe ideas, like I usually get them like when I'm taking a bath, or like,
on a walk.
Yeah, in bed or on a walk. Yeah. And so, I find that the best strategy for coming up with creative ideas is just like feed your brain as many like points as possible, and then just take very long baths until some dots connect.
Yeah, I like the idea of feeding your brain and then feed your body.
Yeah.
Well, Kenji López-Alt, thank you so much for joining us on the pod today.
Thanks for having me.